All right, so without further ado, we're gonna get right into it. And I'm gonna hand it over to Allie Kelly from JazzHR, who's going to do a much better job of introducing herself. She's the CMO of JazzHR. We're super happy to have her here, and she's gonna take it from here. So Allie, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Francisco. Welcome, everyone. My name is Allie Kelly. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at JazzHR. And we are, for those of you unfamiliar with JazzHR, we are purpose-built for small and medium-sized organizations to help exceed their recruiting needs and find and hire the right talent fast. With that, let me make sure that everybody can see my screen here. All right. How's that look? Oh, try this again. So before we jump too deeply into any of the content, I just want to clarify that when we talk about recruiting and hiring remote teams today, it is specifically in context of the United States. And so anything outside of the United States or beyond, even Canada, is not concluded in this. And so I just want to make that very clear. In addition to talking about some of the overall key compliance challenges associated with remote working, we'll specifically dive into the technology that you're using and how that can really help augment and save you a lot of time and increase efficiency when it comes to compliance. We'll also talk a little bit about job postings, screening and interviewing candidates, calculating fair salaries, some general HR best practices, payroll considerations, and tax considerations. But again, clarifying that I am not an attorney, and we do encourage you to speak with an attorney if you have any specific questions pertaining to any of the laws. So let's jump right into the challenges I think that most of us, or at least many of us, are seeing. The benefits of remote work are, of course, undeniable, right? Everyone's enjoying the added flexibility. We're reporting higher levels of satisfaction really across the board, and amazingly more productive workers. But with this increasingly remote workforce comes a lot of increased complication and complexity. And so while the pandemic has certainly fast-tracked the workforce shift to distributed environments, and as the economy continues to reopen, it was a little bit of a drip there for a while, but it feels like the faucet's really been turned on. 74% of workers are expecting to continue to work remotely and from home permanently. And this is a seismic shift that, I don't think anybody has really seen the likes of in years. Transitioning to this remote environment isn't always as simple as mailing laptops out and upgrading your company's Zoom account, which of course we all had to do. But everything from welcoming new team members from afar has required companies to really digitize their entire process, or they're hiring with new processes with things like video interviewing and contactless onboarding. Building a multi-location team also exposes your company to brand new employment laws and accompanying compliance risks, of course. And when we think about what is really behind that, it's just like real estate: location, location, location. So remote employees are absolutely subject to the employment laws of the state in which they work, not the state in which the employer is located. In other words, HR teams must account not only for the federal and local regulations, but also the laws of any state in which an employee is working. And so in the past, while that may have been localized, I'm based out of just outside of Boston, and there are workers that we've accommodated from Rhode Island, New Hampshire, neighboring states. But that was, generally speaking, that would be the sort of purview of laws that we would need to understand. Now, where we're accommodating remote workers across the country, we are subject to all the states that our workers are in, that live in and work there. So this presents a particular challenge for many small businesses like JazzHR. So while larger organizations may have entire departments dedicated to ensuring compliance, most of us, smaller organizations, really lack the resources to guarantee full adherence. And still, the penalties for non-compliance are substantial and not at all relative to the size of our business, but it includes everything from financial losses, security breaches, and a damaged corporate reputation, which is obviously horrible. And we also know that this is something that everyone's challenged with, not just small organizations. So ideally, of course, before permitting employees to work remotely, we would develop policies and procedures to help manage effectively and comply with all applicable laws. But in reality, that may not have been the case for most of us. And so hopefully today we'll take some of the guesswork out of staying compliant while you grow your remote team and get you started on the right foot. And one of the best ways to do that is really to evaluate your existing tech stack. And today we'll talk primarily about recruiting technologies. But understanding that technology has connected all of us and workers, right, across the different boundaries, it allows them to work from anywhere in the world, but really in non-traditional environments. And whether it's the federal, state, or local level, employment laws are constantly changing. And there's over 180 federal regulations alone to ensure your hiring process fulfills the many compliance requirements in each state. So for all of this, careful tracking and record keeping is absolutely crucial to ensuring full adherence and compliance. Whether it's federal, local, state, wage, hour laws, right? There's a whole span of laws that really pertain to record keeping that we may not have had to do before. Relying on any manual processes, so spreadsheets, emails, managing multiple inboxes, paper documents to collect and report on recruitment data, especially for multi-state employees, can be both time-consuming and obviously risky. Business owners who store sensitive candidate information in a local document, for example, increase the chances of data loss, security breaches, and ultimately non-compliance. Adhering to these regulations while keeping your costs low, it's really important that you invest in technologies that automate a lot of that for you. In addition to, and the benefits are numerous. There are both, you're going to save time, right, and result in more effective recruitment processes and compliance. So the more routine these time tracking and record keeping processes are, the less likely these companies will have inconsistency among records. So in terms of where to start and what we're looking at specifically today, there are really two areas that we recommend using to simplify remote data collection and accurate reporting. The first is really where JazzHR fits in, so applicant tracking systems. This is really, they're designed to accelerate your hiring process and digitize your hiring process. And they really, not just JazzHR, but any capable ATS is going to allow you to track, manage, and communicate with job seekers right through the full recruiting funnel. An ATS also has a lot of benefits in terms of centralizing your talent acquisition process. So where the ATS will automatically collect and store candidate information and hiring related records, most also include reporting and analytics capabilities that enable you to easily report on compliance related obligations. So EEOC, OFCCP, no matter where your candidates are located. And depending on where your potential hires are, you may have a legal obligation to only store their data for a certain amount of time, and it can really vary state by state. In California, the CCPA, for example, requires that California-based applicants' data not be kept in perpetuity. Choosing an ATS that allows you to easily track and delete records in an automated and bulk fashion really does help to ensure this type of compliance and will allow you to keep those records for further auditing. For HRIS or Human Resource Information Systems, which most of us at this point have, they're great in really facilitating a smooth transition from a candidate to new hire. So it's taking off right where JazzHR ends and taking everything sort of the rest of the way for the hiring lifecycle or the employee lifecycle. These solutions include things like built-in digital paperwork, payroll, employee management, and usually some significant analytics and reporting capabilities. Like applicant tracking systems and recruiting software, and HRIS is really going to empower your team to automatically track and store new hire information. This is especially useful for monitoring and collecting state-specific information as well as local-specific information, including new hire paperwork and unique tax requirements, which is obviously a huge challenge for many people. Most states, or almost all states at this point, require some form of new hire reporting, but the mandated or optional data points can really vary state by state. So choosing an HRIS in this case that will automatically send these new hire reports for remote employees to their respective states for you, along with any federal forms or other obligation, like I-9s, W-4s, W-2s, is really an important aspect of that functionality. And, it's important to note that while you're implementing an ATS or an HRIS that will empower you to build a very compliant recruitment foundation, they can't guarantee compliance. So that's where a clear understanding of the individual hiring stage requirements really comes into play. And so an example of that is really it starts at the very beginning, which is your job postings. So when we think about even things like the job description, now that you have the right tools in place, it's really time to take a closer look at the individual steps within each part of the hiring process. And obviously this makes the most sense to start here. So made up of really the description and the application, right? So the job posting is two separate parts, the description and the application. Your posting serves really two main purposes, right? To inform the candidate or potential job seekers about the role and help your team to make the decision or make an initial assessment of each candidate's fit for that role. So while many teams leverage pre-written job descriptions or a standard application template to speed up that process, it's critical to pay really close attention to certain aspects when hiring for these remote roles. So each job description offers a chance to tell candidates about the individual role and your company as a whole. In addition to highlighting benefits, perks, and culture, it's important to really set the stage for proper compliance at this point, especially on the remote teams. If you don't already, I strongly would consider using or consider including the following in your job description to best comply with regulations, no matter where your candidates are based. So at-will disclaimers. So for at-will employment, meaning that either the employer or the employee can terminate the employment relationship at any time, is recognized in some form in nearly every single state. Tracking candidate-specific states to decide whether or not you should include a disclaimer on your application is readily available. We'll provide links at the end of in the follow-up to this webinar for anyone that's interested in that. Similarly, EEO or non-discrimination statements really let candidates know that an employer doesn't discriminate in hiring based on federally protected classifications like race, religion, veteran status, et cetera. This does not include discrimination based on sexual orientation or on gender identity at the federal level. 16 states, to my knowledge, have independently passed laws prohibiting this type of discrimination. There are at least 8 other in flight right now for legislation. And learning more and more about that state-by-state guidance and considering including these classifications for remote employees is something that we would also recommend considering. Again, it's important to understand what's going on in each state and where they apply. Under the ADA, so Americans with Disabilities Act, ensuring information on reasonable accommodation is also another area that we strongly suggest including in all of your job descriptions. So under ADA, employers who have 15 or more employees must provide reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities to go through the hiring process in an equal manner. Some states and local laws may require that employers with fewer employees also have reasonable accommodations. And we do believe that it's a best practice if you can make those accommodations in any case, regardless of your size. For remote hiring, this means smaller employers in particular should really consider including language around how to request reasonable accommodation. In some cases, even allowing or providing for the employees to work remotely is considered reasonable accommodation in and of itself. Salary transparency is also a critical thing to put on job descriptions, and this is not something that has always been the case in the past. Some states do require employees to disclose salary ranges in job postings in accordance with Colorado, for example, their Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, for example. Businesses must list the exact hourly wage and salary range in each job description. So, and we do see more legislation sort of working right now. And so I would expect to see more of that nationally rolled out, certainly at the state level moving forward. When we think about, oops, looks like I was one behind there, apologies. Managing candidates, everything from interviewing candidates to screening, it's important to consider really what laws will apply and what don't. And recently, HR directed a survey and found that 91% of small businesses believe they are somewhat or completely sure their hiring process doesn't include illegal questions. Only a little more than half could actually correctly identify what constituted an illegal question. So when it comes to interviewing and background checks or drugs, always understanding, what works, what you can say, what you can't. ADA, so EEOC, OFCCP. The ADA doesn't override other federal laws, but it will override some state or local laws that provide less protection or benefit. So, however, if a state or local law provides more protection or greater benefit, it will certainly override in that case. Job seekers, when it comes to actually screening your candidates, job seekers found your postings and submitted their applications, which is great. Getting on your way to making those hires is obviously the single biggest step, but narrowing down your talent pipeline and identifying those top candidates presents even more compliance risks and challenges that we need to be aware of. So from assessments and interviews to background checks and drug screening, this process includes many accompanying regulations and potential pitfalls, especially when your employees are remote, or your potential employees are remote. The sort of top guidelines that we think it's important to be aware of when screening these candidates are age. So, asking any candidate how old they are, or that may indicate their age at all, might seem like a natural question in certain contexts, but most interviewers, and not necessarily in HR, but hiring managers or sort of non-HR focused interviewers don't realize it immediately opens the door for age discrimination. The Discrimination in Employment Act, which is the ADEA, prohibits any age-related interview questions in order to protect employees over 40, which is shockingly low to some of us, and to others, it's not at all. And in some states, the legal age is much younger. So we do encourage you to seek out that information as it pertains to your state. Criminal history is also an important area to understand what you can and cannot ask. So like with the job application, employers really need to be careful in posing or asking in any way interview questions about criminal history. So asking a candidate if they've ever been arrested or convicted of a crime, for example, is actually against the Ban the Box initiative. So it's very difficult to ask that in a way that is legal, but this is where technologies like background checks can really help get you the right information that you need to make the decisions to hire the best employees. So the other thing is, it's important to remember that federal protections are also going to apply in this case. So be sure to refresh your team regularly on the EEOC guidelines around interview questions. And we do recommend that everyone trains their hiring managers or whoever's doing the interviewing on their team to be very familiar with these and frequently revisit them. So finally, we'll talk a little bit about screening. And when we're talking about this, we're really going to focus predominantly on background checks. So of all the candidate screening methods, background checks are subject to very unique requirements depending on where the candidates reside. So if your team was previously in office, this step of the hiring process will perhaps be the biggest adjustment or change to their understanding. At the federal level, the EEOC and Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is the FCRA, provide blanket guidance on how background checks can be used in making employment decisions. This includes considering the nature of the offense, how long ago it occurred, and letting candidates know when they're disqualified based on background check findings. State level guidance, on the other hand, varies state by state. So, and it can vary where it applies, but so when we look at the different protections, it might be when you request, for example. So some employers may be tempted to conduct background checks prior to making a hiring decision, but states like Hawaii and California, for example, have banned conducting those checks before making a job offer. So that really needs to be done after the fact. And this is a trend that we do believe will continue to increase across states. It's also what type of information you're requesting is also protected. So even if you're in a state that allows background checks prior to making an offer, it's important that you're paying careful attention to the type of information you request. So some states ban employers from considering sealed or expunged records, arrests that did not lead to convictions, or offenses of a certain, under a certain age. And I do encourage people to really understand the state by state regulations on that as well. How you make decisions based on results, whether it's pre or post office offer, the results of a background check must be approached differently depending on the state and even in some cases the local government. So employers in certain states can only rescind an offer, even if the conviction was within the past 10 years or is relevant to the job. Understanding which states protect which actions is also a really important thing to understand. So knowing your local laws, your state laws, and the federal laws in this case is really important. And of course, before you conduct any background check, it's really important to understand the benefits compared to the risk. If your team is unclear on any of the federal, state, or local regulations or guidance, we strongly encourage you to consult legal counsel to ensure that you're being fully compliant and aren't opening up yourself to any risk or further damage. And once you've screened your pipeline and found the right fit for your team, it's the right time to transition the candidates to employees. And with that, we will hand it out of JazzHR and over to Gusto.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ali. That was amazing. Really appreciate all the insights. Before we hand it out to Folasha from Gusto, I do want to do a little bit of a pulse check. I'm gonna throw in a question on the Slido. So I would love to know, what is the main challenge you're facing as a business owner right now? So I have a couple of options. So feel free to participate and give us your answer. Also, two reminders: there will be a recording of this webinar. So if for some reason you can't stay all throughout, we will be sending a recording on Monday. You're gonna get a link with, as well as other valuable information, a recap. And for the Q&A, I see a lot of really amazing questions trickling in. Keep putting your questions. We're going to dedicate the last 15 minutes of it to answering Q&A. We have Gusto, we have JazzHR, we have FreshBooks. So we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible. So that we stay on track, I'm going to hand it over right away to Folasha Blugh from Gusto, who's going to take the rest of the webinar. Take it away, Folasha.
Absolutely. Let me just share here. Okay. Again, so good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. Again, my name is Folasha Blugh, and I'd like to thank you all for attending. So as we all know, 2020's drastic shift to a remote workforce was reactive and out of necessity, whereas the same shift in the months to come and beyond will be more proactive, strategic, and intentional. The employer advantages of having a remote workforce are undeniable, but these advantages are also accompanied with various operational challenges. So I'll be spending my segment addressing some specific HR, payroll, and taxation considerations employers should be mindful of when managing a remote workforce. One thing I like to call attention to is the scope of my discussion excludes COVID-19's temporary legislative updates, but there are some great resources linked at the end. So here you'll find a list of some HR, payroll, and taxation considerations. But I do want to make note that this is not an exhaustive list. At first glance, there's a set of topics that may seem overwhelming and way too much to cover in depth here. So the broad scope of this discussion is meant to simply call out most topics and elaborate on some of the more complex ones. So how do you stay compliant when growing your remote team? I think a good practice is to determine where a law is governed, become familiar with its reputable resources, and break the large complex issues into smaller digestible pieces. Our payroll laws are usually regulated by the IRS, Department of Labor, or state or local government agencies that release publications, employer guides, and detailed contents on its agency or association websites, usually ending in a .gov. I've included a few reputable links to the topics discussed on each slide. Please also note it's always recommended to consult with a professional attorney or CPA for specific guidance. So first, under HR considerations is worker classification. This is usually an employer's first basic decision during the hiring process, but an essential one that affects the entire relationship. The impact of misclassifying an employee as an independent contractor includes things like not withholding and paying income and employment taxes, not filing the correct report or returns with the right agencies, or possibly paying below minimum wage and missing overtime pay, or even eliminating participation in eligible company benefits. So while it's often more cost-effective for a business to use independent contractors over an employee, an error here will more than likely be followed by substantial financial penalties. Penalties can range from 1.5% of all wages for not withholding income taxes to 100% of the employee's share of missed FICA taxes. To avoid misclassification of its workers, employers should become familiar with the following IRC tests for determining worker classification, keeping in mind that the recognized test may vary from one state to another. Employers can also complete and send Form SS8 to the IRS to receive a definitive ruling on a worker's status. So that's right, the IRS will make the determination for you. But if you do go this route, it's recommended for an employer to treat the worker as an employee while waiting to receive a response from the IRS, which can easily take a few months. Gusto actually has a great blog with more detail on this content linked right here on this slide. Another very important classification employers must determine for its workers or for its employees specifically would be the employee's FLSA status, exempt or non-exempt. FLSA, short for Fair Labor Standards Act, also known as the Federal Wage Hour Law, regulates minimum wage, overtime, child labor, equal pay, and record-keeping requirements for its covered employees. FLSA violations usually occur when employers designate non-exempt employees as exempt, resulting in monetary non-compliance with the federal, state, or local minimum wage and overtime pay requirements. Penalties include fines up to $1,100 per violation, in addition to back pay and damages. To avoid misclassification of its employees, employers should become familiar with the federal and state wage and hour laws for its FLSA covered and FLSA exempt population. So for example, employers can't just classify an employee as exempt to bypass overtime and record keeping requirements. An exempt employee has to pass the duty and salary basis test, as well as meeting the salary threshold, which varies by state. You can refer to the DOL website for additional information specific to your population of employees. Next up is timekeeping violations. Now, while meal and rest periods aren't required under FLSA, it is governed by state wage and hour laws. Here we'll see many states develop their own specifications on the minimum number of hours employees must work before taking a break. For example, Nevada employers must provide all employees working 8 hours shifts a meal period of at least 30 minutes, while California employers must provide the same meal period to employees working at least 5-hour shifts. So here we can see California is the more stringent state, and that's no surprise to anyone. But violations usually occur when employers fail to specify work hours and breaks or pay employees for unapproved worked time. So to avoid timekeeping violations, employers should consider things like implementing a timesheet attestation. And here, that's where employees sign off on his or her timesheet, acknowledging accuracy and that all hours have been recorded. Employers can also encourage meals away from the computer and promptly clocking in and out and prohibiting off-the-clock work. Employers should also pay employees for time work, even if it's unapproved or in violation of company policy. Employers should also include consequences in its policies that addresses the repercussions for failure to follow guidelines, resulting in disciplinary action, termination of the telecommuting arrangement, or even termination of employment. But most importantly, employers should ensure consistent enforcement and obtain written acknowledgement from its employees. As stated, this is governed by the state wage and hours law, so you should refer to your state's DOL website. So some additional HR considerations I like to call out that we won't get to spend too much time on, but they're just as important, include complying with state's new hire reporting and other documentation requirements. So New York, for example, New York employers are required to report new hires and rehires within 20 days of its employee's start date to the corresponding state agency. New York employers must also provide pay rate notices to new hires and whenever information on the notice changes. Employers with a remote workforce should also consider implementing alternative ways for distributing workplace postings. So the objective here is to ensure employees are aware of their rights. So delivering these materials via mail, email, or even snail mail are possible options. And lastly, offering different benefit programs or implementing COLA practices are strategies employers are using to stay competitive. So employers should consider shifting from on-site perks to more remote programs and establishing transparent and competitive geographic pay policies. Now on to payroll considerations. So while the wage and hour issues are regulated under FLSA, many states and localities have passed their own laws. A general rule here is employers with a remote workforce must pay employees according to the wage and hour laws corresponding to the employee's home, which is also their work location. However, it's also worth mentioning regarding the federal, state, and local relationship that employers must follow the law that's more favorable to the employee. To avoid wage and hour violations, employers should know that the relevant federal, state, and local definition of an FLSA covered and exempt employee, as well as the minimum wage rates and overtime pay provisions. So for example, the city of Berkeley, California has a minimum wage of $16.07 per hour, and that's more favorable to the state's minimum wage. And this rate is actually adjusted annually for inflation. So there are multiple factors that are going on when you have to consider minimum wage, such as effective dates and any other qualifiers, whether if it's a rate specific to an employer of a certain size, or employers of certain industries, or employers working in certain locations. A quick note is the Department of Labor has a great resource and reference tables available on its website linked here. And then I always like to use the reference tables that has a nice consolidated state by state rate, and it helps you keep track of all that information. And of course, it's updated very consistently. Some additional payroll considerations are listed here, and all these laws are governed on the state level. So each state has specific regulations on pay frequency requirements, which addresses the amount of time that can pass before wages must be paid after the end of the pay period. Next is pay statement requirements, which specifies items that must appear on each employee's pay stub or pay statement. Then there's also final wage pay requirements, which addresses how soon employees must be paid when they separate from employment. There's also wage deduction requirements, which specifies the permitted and prohibited voluntary deductions from wages, whether if it's agreed by the or requested by the employee. And lastly is escheatment requirements, which specify how unclaimed and uncashed employee paychecks should be treated. You can locate each state's Department of Labor website through the DOL website provided here for additional information. The final category I'll explore today is by far one of the most regulated, complex, and troublesome areas in payroll taxation, and that's specifically state income tax withholding. Now, the default rule of thumb for state withholding is to withhold taxes for the state where services are performed, but we easily run into many scenarios where this rule doesn't apply. While employers are generally subject to the laws of the state in which its employees perform services, some states have a number of days or amount of money earned threshold that must be met for withholding rules to kick in. And some states have specific exceptions, like for disaster or emergency work, or they'll apply the convenience of the employer test. So employers are frequently faced with the burden of having to figure out which state income tax to withhold from its employees. So to answer this complex question, employers should start by determining the employee's resident state and determining if there's a reciprocal agreement between the resident and work state. Employers should also determine if there's nexus in the employee's resident state. So generally, employers do not need to withhold for employees in a state it does not have nexus in. But please keep in mind that employees teleworking from a state where the employer otherwise does not have nexus will actually create nexus. So the last and most important rule I think is that employers should consider the resident and non-resident taxation policies of each state involved. There are many questions that comes with this information, such as, does the state withhold out-of-state earned wages if nexus exists, and what are the reporting requirements? Please keep in mind that non-compliance here can lead to outstanding withholding and reporting obligations accompanied by penalties and interest. So it's pretty imperative and crucial to get this correct. Some additional taxation considerations are listed here. And while we won't be able to discuss the best practices, I do have a few probing questions that can help get you there. So starting with local income taxes, for instance, something you want to consider or be able to ask is, do you now have a remote employee in one of the 15 plus states with a local payroll tax requirement? So whether if it's a city, a county, school district, mass transit, or occupational privilege tax, or a city service or license fee? And are you aware of the local registration, deposit, and reporting requirements? For state unemployment insurance, is there SUI wage transferability between states? If they're moving from one state to another, do we need to restart withholding again if they've already made the wage-based limit? That all depends on the state. You'll also need to consider, is your remote employee now in a state where there is an employee SUI contribution? Some of those states are New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Is your remote employee working for more than one state, which of course will complicate things just a little bit further. And lastly is state W-4 withholdings. So does the state accept the federal W-4, or will you need to require completion of the state's W-4 form from your employee? There's also filing and filing requirements for withholding and unemployment that varies by state. So you'll need to know, do you need to apply for an account? And is that required within a specified time frame? Or do you need to apply for a state license to do business in that state? What are the acceptable filing methods, electronic versus paper, for instance? And lastly, what the necessary information is needed for reporting, like will they require out-of-state wages? Another thing to consider still in this current time is, are there any temporary COVID-19 legislations in effect? But please note, any temporary nexus waivers due to the pandemic do not provide long-term protection. So it's a recommended practice to make sure that we are able to accommodate the various changes that are occurring pre and post COVID. So a lot of information, but here are some key takeaways. Laws are governed on the federal, state, and local level, and these regulations often vary by state. These same states often have exceptions to its rules, so it's important to become familiar with the available agency resources, whether if it's the IRS, Social Security Administration, Department of Labor, or State Department of Labor websites. There are also many local and state government websites that produce employer tax guides that you can reference for very specific information that will answer a lot of information or a lot of your questions. And it's always, again, recommended to consult with a professional service provider like Gusto or an attorney or CPA for any specific guidance. But lastly, having a documented and up-to-date policy that's in line with the current regulation is the foundation for success. And that concludes my segment, so I'll turn it right back over to you, Francisco.
All right, thank you so much. Let's do a little switcheroo here. And I'm gonna just share my screen very quickly. All right, here we are. Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, Allie and Folasha. That was really, really great. There is so much information that just came down on everyone. So a reminder, this will be recorded, is being recorded. We're gonna share that. Before we move on to the Q&A, because I know we're a little bit over the time, I do wanna let you know that JazzHR and Gusto put together an incredible ebook that they are going to be sharing with all of you. Here is the link. And all of this information, some of it, even more stuff is here. So make sure to check it out. On Monday, when you receive the link to the recording, we're also going to make sure that you get the link to download the free ebook. A couple of reminders from our friends of Gusto. If you want to try it out, if you want to see what they can do for you, they're giving away 3 months for free. There's a link, and they're also going to be putting that link in the breakout room, which we're going to get into in a few minutes. Similarly, with JazzHR, if you want to learn a little bit more about what they can do, if you want to see if this is the right tool for you, they're giving you 20% off for the first 12 months. Stay for their demo and their breakout room, and you'll find out more information about it. But without further ado, we're going to turn it into the Q&A. Now, I've seen a lot of questions into Q&A, so we have Ryan from Gusto, and we have also Ryan from JazzHR and Rachel from Gusto, and they're going to be answering some of the questions that we're getting here. So we're going to start with the ones that we got upvoted. So question number 1. I-9 compliance, when remote COVID exceptions are lifted, how do you maintain I-9 verification compliance? Who wants to jump into that one?
Hi, Francisco. This is Rachel from Gusto. Hope everyone is doing well. That I want to be totally transparent that I'm here kind of from an onboarding capacity and an onboarding advisor to help get you set up on Gusto. We do have HR pros who would probably be the better people to ask that question. And we could absolutely get you set up with them if you would like more information. But I'm not an HR advisor myself, so I certainly don't want to be advising on things and tell you the wrong thing. It may depend on your state. It may depend on where the employee is working, if they're working remotely, but would absolutely, if you would like to be connected with one of our HR advisors, would love to talk to you more about that.
Okay. So we're going to go through these questions, and I think the general rule is if we, there's a question that is more appropriate for either a lawyer or an HR compliance person, we're just going to make a note of that. And perhaps what we can do is follow up directly in the after, because we will collect these questions and we'll follow up with you after with a more concrete answer. Because yeah, you're right, Rachel, we don't want to give the wrong information. So we're going to try to answer as many as possible here. Okay, the next question.
I'm sorry, Francisco.
Go ahead, Folasha.
I can add that for some information on maintaining the Form I-9 compliance, that I would like to refer everyone to the USCIS website. So that's uscis.gov. And there you'll find like a I-9 central page with specific guidelines on how to complete the Form I-9 for remote employees.
Amazing. The next question, I think it's a really good one, is how can small and mid-sized companies maintain compliance with out-of-state remote workers like payroll, tax, employment law issues, especially with a small HR team? I think it's a great question, and a lot of people facing this new reality of hiring remote teams.
I'll go ahead and jump in on that one again. So that is actually something that Gusto is set up for specifically, is to keep your company compliant. We work with a lot of small to mid-sized businesses who might not have a full-fledged HR department. They might have one person who's doing HR, taxes, hiring, is working the finances, jack of all trades kind of situation. But that's where Gusto really excels, is especially with our concierge plan, we actually proactively notify you about law updates. So if we see that, oh, the overtime law in California has changed and you have a remote employee there, you're going to get an email ping from us that will let you know, hey, this has been updated. Let's go ahead and get your employees updated as well to keep you in compliance. So we kind of do that extra legwork for you and all of our customers automatically, and we keep you compliant.
Great. Is there a resource available to determine when out-of-state workers are subject to training/compliance requirements of the state in which a new worker is hired?
That would be something that our HR pros could advise on, depending on which state they're in. I know that for all of our friends on this who are joining us from California, you folks definitely are living in Super Bowl times of HR compliance in that state. But depending on where they're at, they would be able to say, hey, this is a specific training that you have to have for your employees. And that's something our compliance center does as well, is it will, I don't know if you folks are familiar with it, but a couple of years ago, California passed a law that required sexual harassment training for employers over a certain size. And one of the things that we did was proactively notify employers, hey, this is something that's happening in a state where you have employees. We've got a training set up for you. We'd be happy to lead it, to keep you in compliance. And all of that is part of our concierge team.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. Any best practices you can share about getting registered in a new state quickly for a new hire that is in a state your company is not currently registered in?
Our onboarding team would be more than happy to help you out with that. That's actually where I started my career at Gusto, was being an onboarding advisor and kind of learning how to register in all 50 states, the sneaky solutions for getting those numbers and rates faster. But we actually have a team here of experts, and their whole job is to get you set up on Gusto, in payroll compliantly. We do partner with a company called CoreNet, which actually registers you in those states for a fee, but we can absolutely help you do it for free as well, and are more than happy to help you onboard.
Great. I'm going to skip this one because I feel like we kind of addressed it, but I'm going to go to the following one. I'm not clear on the nexus topic. Please advise. And I joined that question. Like, could you expand a little bit more on the nexus topic?
Hi there, sure. So nexus is basically a definition for a business connection. So if an employer has nexus in a state, it is basically subject to the laws of that state and should act accordingly, whether if that's the withholding of taxes, depositing and filing, or just honoring the minimum wages and so forth. So if a business has a remote employee that is working from home, and they have now nexus due to that telecommuting arrangement, they have to honor the laws of that state. So the employee should now be paid the minimum wage if they're non-exempt in accordance to their resident state, and all of the resident state law applies. However, if nexus does not exist, generally employers will not have to set up new tax accounts and so forth. So I do implore you to visit the laws of the particular state in question to get additional information.
Okay. No, we could stay here up until, 15, 20 more minutes answering questions, but we promised to wrap it up at the hour, and we also promised to move people to the breakout rooms. So I just put in the chat 2 links. So we're going to do this. There's 3 different options, like I mentioned. You can stay in this channel, and we're going to do a demo on FreshBooks and how FreshBooks helps you manage some of your teams. We're also going to look at some of the features that make FreshBooks a great solution for small businesses accounting. If you want to go and learn a little bit more about either JazzHR or Gusto, the links are on the Slido. There's a little menu that has the links. If you don't see those on the chat section on Zoom, we also have the links there for you. You'll disconnect from the Zoom and join the Zoom over there. So we're going to do that now. So I'm going to give it about a minute, and then we're going to transition to the rooms. But before we do that, thank you so much to everyone who presented today. Thank you to Allie, to Folasha, to Ryan and Rachel from Jazz and Gusto. It was really, really great. A lot of great information, and I'm sure people will watch again to digest and take it all in, because there was a lot of great insights and things that you shared. So thank you again, and we'll break now into our demos. So thank you for being here. And with that, I'm going to hand this channel over to Ashley from the FreshBooks team. She's an account executive, and she's going to walk you through some of the features that FreshBooks has for you.
You good to go?
You're good to go.
Awesome. Well, I am Ashley. Like Francisco stated, I'm an account executive here with FreshBooks, and I'm going to just walk you through some of the great features of FreshBooks, and then also tie it to, like Francisco said, how to grow your team as well using FreshBooks. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen here. So hopefully everyone can see this, but here just is a brief overview of FreshBooks in general. Super user-friendly, super easy to maneuver. I have a lot of people switch over from QuickBooks, just a completely different view of things and dashboards and types of ways in that sense. One thing we really take our pride in here at FreshBooks is that a small business owner, medium business owner does not have to be an accountant in order to be able to successfully run their business, have their accounting reports and everything. Your job is to learn how is to run your business and to grow in that sense and not worry about it in other ways. So that's what we take our pride in here and really try to do our best to make sure that happens. Here, as you see, is our dashboard here with FreshBooks. Now, this is obviously fake demo account, so it may look a little skewed or something like that. Just obviously, no one's paying my invoices, so just keep that in mind when you do see this here. But as you see, this is an overview of FreshBooks, just the health of your company at that point in time, where you stand, what your unbilled time is, your profit, your loss, and everything in that sense. So easy snapshot, you log in, you see this right here. The way you are seeing this right now would be the owner's view. I will in a minute show you what you would see if you were an employee or something like that, but this would be the owner's view. Starting here, a little brief view of clients. I really enjoy how our clients are set up. For example, here's a list of the clients. Here's very frequently used ones. If I came in here, for example, I named this company Dogs, but you have the name of the company and then your top contact that company. I'm able also to have additional contact under here. So if I want to send an invoice to different people, maybe just Jimmy and not Brittany, or maybe Cassie and Jimmy and not Brittany, or all three, I can do that. I also have the ability to see all invoices that I've tied to Brittany and or Dogs, the company down here, as well as all the other tabs here. I can tie my expenses to that. I can see any unbilled expenses, unbilled time, and see how my client is doing. And if they're a profitable client of mine, or if I should be charging them more. I have a little CRM, basically to type some notes in there for my relationship, as well as being able to generate any statements that I would like to see on that client. I'm going to show you briefly just how to create an invoice. Very simple. We have a couple different invoice templates. This is just one of our few invoice templates I already had set up. Right there, create a new invoice. I pretended to be a personal training business. So come in here, I can add whatever client that I'd like. Obviously, you can have more information in there as it would be an actual client. I'm able to set reminders, charge late fees. I am able to do other currencies depending where you are located, as well as attach invoice PDF attachments. Very simple, come in here. I can add any line item that I've already added in there or add my own as I speak. I can set my rate, my quantity, add any discounts, request a deposit, and then as well, I can add a payment schedule. So if I want 50% now, 50% later, it's up to me. I have this currently set up to accept FreshBooks payments straight through FreshBooks. So it allows me here to just have someone receive the invoice, put their card information in, and it would send back right away and mark as paid. I can do ACH bank transfer as well within the US through FreshBooks payments. We do work with FreshBooks payments, Stripe, and PayPal. We have a great relationship with FreshBooks payments, so I always suggest starting there. I also can set it up so I only take cash or check. So very easy. I can always mark it as paid. I can mark it as sent. I can do anything in that sense to be able to keep good records of that. Expenses down here. I'm sure most of you have a credit card that is connected to your bank account for specifically your business. You can connect your bank, and every time you use that card and swipe it, your credit card charges would import into FreshBooks and would categorize them. Yes, here and there, you're going to have expenses that are uncategorized or something like that. You just go in, make the adjustment that you need to, and mark it what category it should be in. You can also create subcategories under each category to help with reports as well. I can attach receipts. I can also tag anything. I tag a specific project or client that I'm working on, so it routes back to them, and put any notes. So it keeps a great track of everything in that sense. I can also track my accounts payable. I can put in my bills and the vendors that I'm working with to make sure that that's tracked in FreshBooks as well. I do have an opportunity for proposals and estimates. Those can be very easily created. Estimates are very simple. Proposals, you can have photos or any other category you want to. You can write or type anything in there. And then I can easily actually convert those straight into an invoice. Pops up. I don't have to recreate it. Jumping down here a little bit so that we can focus on growing our business. I have access to all these reports to be able to pull. I can favor some up here and bring this down and see everything I have. Like I said, FreshBooks prides itself in being a company and a platform that you don't have to be an accountant to be able to use FreshBooks. So we have it set up where you come in here, you hit invite, and you invite your accountant free of charge with most of our plans into FreshBooks to be able to view this as an accountant and see what they need to be able to file your taxes. Kind of switching gears from that to more of our growing our team aspect of FreshBooks and how that would work. As you see, I have a tab right here called My Team. So as a FreshBooks user, I can invite different parts of my company, different personalities of my company in as different parts. So basically, I can have me as the owner, George as a manager, Brittany and Jordan and Kim as employees. I have Fresh Start here as a contractor so that they can invoice me for what they're doing their work on. And then I have Sally as my accountant. So I can actually go here, and I really love to show this as well. Each member that you invite has different roles and allowances of what they are able to see and view in FreshBooks. So I'm going to pull this up really quick. Oops, I apologize. Pull this up. Sorry, 1 second. My computer's being weird. Okay. So I'm able to, I think you can see this, bring in different employees. So for example, if my employee, if I invited as an employee, my employee can only see how to track their time, projects they're involved in, and they'd be able to track their expenses. That is it. They're not going to be able to see your profitability. They're not going to be able to see your payments or anything like that. You really don't typically want your employees seeing those things. On top of that, as you see, a manager has different allowances, a contractor, your accountant, and your owner. You can have an admin, which has almost access to everything except for changing your settings, changing payments, updating your bank connections, and different things in that sense. So it's a really great way to just kind of monitor and make sure everyone's only using and seeing what they need to be seeing here on your account. Going off of that, each member that has access to their FreshBooks account that would be invited as, for say, an employee can come in here in any view, say what project they worked on. So we can say they worked on asphalt laying for Bank of America. They laid some concrete. It took 6 hours, and I'm going to log that time. So I can track my time as an employee here in FreshBooks as well, and each individual employee can track their time. Over here in projects as well, once I've created a project, I can then invite different people into that project. For example, I'm going to come in here. I'm a member, obviously, as the owner, as well as George, Brittany, Jordan, in their different roles. So they can come in, add time, add expenses, and view how this project is working and going. I can set cost rates on how much I'm going to charge for that person working on that project, as well as how much I pay them. So I can then determine if that project was and if it is profitable. With that, I can also view, for example, any expenses, any reports, anything that I have tied to this project. Like I said, check my profitability. Obviously, I've already invoiced this one, so it shows my profitability there. Anytime that I make any changes, updates, anything to the project, it would be shown in here. And every person on that project I listed, including the client, if I also added the client on that project, will be able to see any update. So if I want to send a photo of what the new deck I built looks like or anything like that, they will be able to see that. So it's a really great overview of every project. Obviously, as well, I can directly invoice from this specific project. So that way I don't have to go and create a new invoice from there. Lastly, just some some tidbits here. We do have many add-ons and integrations here with FreshBooks, where you can add so many different things, as you see, Gusto, like we've talked about very recently here, and tons of integrations that you can integrate with. We also have an open API, but can always use Zapier and PySync. A lot of ways that can be done to make it work for your business and your company. So with that, I did want to let you guys know, on top of what Gusto and is doing here, we also do have a contest for a $300 gift card. So I am going to actually add that here in the chat as well, so you guys can enter a contest to win a $300 gift card here from FreshBooks.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I just want to jump in that I'm looking at the response from right now, the entry for, there's still 34 people that are in this chat, and there's only one entry for the contest. So
oh geez, I'm going to add that over there right now here.
I put it on the chat, and Ashley's going to put it as well, but click on that link, enter, because otherwise this person is just going to win right away. And like, there's no commitment. This is really just a contest. We just wanted to do something fun at the end of it. So do enter, and good luck to everybody. So we're gonna put in, do you have that link there?
Yes, I am sending it now. It's not letting me send it to you specifically, so I had to make an adjustment there, but now it's sent.
There we go. I'm going to share with the attendees as well. One more time. Okay, well, you at least have 1 in 33 chances of winning, so odds are pretty good. And we're going to announce the winner at the end of, we're going to wait, we're going to give it about an hour or two, see if somebody changed their mind. But by the end of today or tomorrow, we're going to contact the winner, and we'll do it digitally. I imagine we'll figure out an electronic gift card, and we'll send it to you. Either Ashley or one of our other account executives will be in touch with you. But if you made it all the way to here, I just want to say thank you so much for being part of this webinar. We hope the content was relevant. This was helpful to you. We're going to come back with more, and we have our next webinar on June 22nd. You'll get an email about that, and it's a great topic as well. So looking forward to it. And until then, take care, stay safe, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.